and sit yoga style through 3 whole days of dialectical historical materialism and criticism, self-criticism. Today we need real chairs with solid backrests to work on a one-page table of contents. Where we survived then with just instant coffee after instant coffee, often taken with cigarettes that we pried from their packs and lighted up in a ritual of highly individualized movements signifying nothing. Today, we cannot survive without freshly brewed coffee or calming hot tea, and cigarettes are simply those things that trigger dreadful conversations about senior ailments. And while meal breaks then were just an unthinking part of the act of living, today we begin every meeting at Figaro BGC with a thoughtful decision of whether it shall be grilled chicken sandwich, thin crust pizza, or pasta arrabbiata. Of course, we were 17, 18, 20, 22, 25 then. We are 59, 61, 63, 65 now. We were the rabble-rousers of the fatherland then. We are the card-carrying senior citizens of the Republic now. We were the kids who reaped traffic on the streets then, if for a cause. We are the adults inside the cars that rule traffic on the streets now, if for a reason. We were free agents, spirited, strong, bull-headed, and noisy then. We are with grandchildren, aware that our public behavior reflects on the companies we work for or own, and versed on the virtues of negotiation, compromise, and accommodation now. But then and now, we are not placid. We take very few things sitting down. We remain opinionated. We take sides, and we like things done our way. Throughout the making of this book, this was evident. We always seem to have differences in opinion. Even the very existence of the book we launched tonight became an issue. Before one word was ever written, some of us dismissed the book as an exercise in self-advertisement, arguing further that bringing up the Marcoses at this time demonstrated a tendency to look outside ourselves instead of inside, to cast blame. It also meant, they argued, that we hadn't moved on. That voice was a minority, however. The rest were one in thinking that we never saw ourselves as superhero or savior or special species. We just happened to be people telling our stories of a very dark time when a president made the mistake of thinking he could amass it all and we'd all just look the other way. And yes, we haven't moved on. Should we? Has there been justice? Has there been atonement? Do we allow the same dark lords to simply resurrect their names, rewrite their history in expensive and excellently done videos on the net, saying we could have been the next Singapore, run for office and win, and make for a beady grab of the palace again? No, not on our watch. Because then and now we knew right from wrong. We had lived through a time that took away our youth. We changed the course of our lives forcibly. We had shared a common fear and an uncommon courage. We survived because we gave each other faith and strength in a universe that, with a little help, corrects itself. We endured. Together, we put together what skills and intellect we had for organizing, for writing, for healing, for teaching, because we wanted a kinder world. And for this, we live today with memories of the humiliation, the kicks, the blows, the cruelty we suffered in the hands of inferior human beings. They who followed the orders of those who sat at the palace, surrounded by ministers and minions, who all paid obeisance and made hay, knowingly participating in the cruelty, yet who today are still around, living the lives of wealthy citizens. Even more sadly, we see that today very few understand that a dictatorship did happen and can happen again. We thought to ourselves, We were once campus writers. We were propagandists for the movement. We have this extreme experience. We have these untold stories. Why not tell them in a small book? And the articles came. It has been 40 years. For a labyrinth of reasons, not many of us had resurrected those memories in all that time. Of course, Butch Dalisay did in his book, Keeping Time in a Warm Place. But then Butch is an extraordinary writer. He just writes and writes, while around him, UP and family and vintage pens and the Beatle, life in general happened. In this book, he shares a story whose vantage point is that of the first of our dead. Butch shows us a milieu where students devote their days to changing an unjust society, but they fight with the only tool they have, the word, the discourse, the idea, the pen. Then one day, like any other, they find the dead body of one of their own, a boy of about 14 or 15, bloodied, a hole in his skull. In prose that is at once distant, witty, and unweepy, Butch captures that life-changing moment. But as cool as the Dalisay prose is, it must have pained him to write that. Just as it certainly pained Sol Juvida and Angie Castillo to write about their sons. In fact, the two kept finding ways to get out of the assignment. One had a business to run, the other had charity work in her province. One was due to go abroad, the other had to do yoga. But when two of those listed, Ray Vea and myself, I believe, did not meet the deadline, already moved 3 times, Angie and Sol, being team players, forced themselves to go back to that time of darkness when soldiers could enter your house and take away your child. Sol writes about her dread of evenings, when raids are more likely to happen, when only the neighbors will hear the scuffle, but which crony-owned newspaper will report her missing anyway. Many nights, she sleeps fully clothed, in jeans and top, cash in her pocket, her escape route firmly in her head, even if she isn't terribly athletic and is not likely to manage hoisting herself and her baby boy over the back fence. Sol's is a moving tale, and one that makes us remember how, collectively, we all suffered the thought of that knock at the door. Angie's pain is already happening. She is forced to stay away from her baby boy. She and her husband work underground, and they know what happens when soldiers come upon the children of activists. This has happened to other comrades. Children are used to make the hardiest talk. Children are kidnapped. Children are kept in camps or in soldiers' homes and raised as their own, erasing the memory of parents. And so Angie endures the separation. She writes, "Palagi sa isip ko ang paghihinayang. Baka hindi ko makita ang una niyang hakbang o hindi ko madinig ang una niyang salita. Nalulunos ako kapag nalaman kong nahulog siya sa dulan, o kaya'y nadapa, o kaya'y nilagnat. Mahirap palang maging ina, 11 na taong gulang lang ako noon." The book is not all highly charged emotion though. We do have our cool, dispassionate, overly educated ideas, guys. Vic Manara, formerly a physics professor and now president and CEO of his own company, talks about what he personally witnesses on a day-to-day basis of those who, in his words, tasted the intoxicating brew of power without accountability. He writes about the first Philippine Holdings Corporation, where he worked in 1978 and which was the majority owner of Meralco. The board chairman was Abilio and the president was Regala, says Vic, quote, "But it soon became apparent from lunchtime and cocktail hour chatter among the executives that actual corporate power was in the hands of an occasional visitor to the boardroom, a tall, stocky man with a shock of white hair, thus the reference to him as Whitey, Benjamin Cocoy Romualdez, the brother of Imelda Romualdez Marcos. If there is any beef to be made with Vic, it is that he does not go on and on. Being such an ideas guy, he doesn't get it that political gossip are what the unconvinced like to read. Toti Chiquiamco is another non-gossipy fellow. As we in the publication group like to say, he is a man apart. From the esoteric course he took at Syracuse University to his most favorite topic, rent-seeking, he stands alone. He is different, unique, not at all easy to copy. It is to Toti's credit that I finally understand rent-seeking and its real connection to the declaration of martial law. So thank you, Toti. Diwa Gunigundo is a gifted man who is also a man of God. He is Deputy Governor of the Banco Central, which sent him as its scholar to the London School of Economics. He is also a pastor, and he is a lecturer at the National Defense College. As a 1970s activist, he was, in his words, never a fan of the vociferous left-fist-raising militancy that punctuated the long stretch of España. Today, he looks back at his political journey and says, quote, "My view on the need for national democracy when I was in my 20s has never fundamentally changed, even now that I am in my 50s. I never wasted 30 years of my life because I chose to pursue in the public service my idea of national democracy. The bottom line remains that, after all is said and done, we need people to govern, to engineer, to treat the sick, to litigate in the courts of justice, to plan the economy and manage the currency. Marketplace ministry is an important plank of principled militancy." Unquote. Vic Wenceslao, Wency to us all, is a more secular fellow who has reached his 26th year as an entrepreneur. He truly believes in the books that say that the existence of an entrepreneurial class is crucial, if not a precondition to a developing country. Thus, training and inspiring nationalist entrepreneurs today has become his life's advocacy. It has become his way of serving the people. If I may, Wency is a personal favorite because, for one, he was a CEGP Gen Sec when I was the treasurer, and so we worked together nearly every day. I would often go to PCC, he would occasionally visit Marinol, and we would regularly work at the UP Law School in Padre Faura to keep the national organization tight. I see big changes in him. He has not lost his temper once since we met up in our 10-10-10 reunion. He it is that prods me to be inclusive whenever I'm stewing about someone, and he still applies dialectics everywhere. He brings up many sides to every tale, plays the devil's advocate, pushes the arguments around, only this time without the loss of cool. Then and now, when he gets excited, his eyes light up, and they did so when the idea of Not on Our Watch came up. It is because his eyes lighted up that we did not have to fundraise to publish this book, that we had a regular venue for editorial meetings, and that we have the book in hardcover, which to me as editor is not a small matter, and that we even have finger food to go around tonight. Thank you, Wency. Al Mendoza and Jack Chotico are seemingly as different as two people can be, but they both have an enviable talent. They can tell a story. Al's is a short, fast-paced tale about the time he was arrested and branded a communist because he did periodikit in mga tarem. That's the act of pasting newspapers painted over with causes and slogans on public and private walls with just homemade goo and personal daring for equipment. Al, using his favorite style of one-sentence paragraphs, paces his piece well, and more likely than not, readers will read it through to the very end. Jack's is a longish take on the petit bourgeois, which he defines as, quote, a well-meaning individual, usually well-educated, apparently of comfortable means, who by the nature of his economic background is an unrepentant, impossible case when it comes to towing the mass line and accepting organizational discipline, unquote. In other words, people like him. Both Al and Jack like detail and color, and both engage. Just as engaging is J. Valencia Glorioso, the most stunning president at CEGP when I was there, a product of St. Teresa's College, Tita Raday's dance classes, and a home in New Manila big enough to hold the CEGP convention. J was really something to behold. And she was a good and hard worker too. Now she's just as stunning and works just as hard as a theater actress, a singer, a producer, while raising 5 children with husband Sinen. In her piece, Remembering the Music and the Storm, she meshes her past and present seamlessly. Quote, "My yearning to express idealism, truth, and beauty must have found a haven in the philosophical romanticism offered by the communist and socialist ideology. It was a romance with and a passion for something to which I felt attracted, the beauty and forcefulness of arts, dance, and music, together with a cause that can unite human beings in a common struggle for justice and rights." Unquote. Manolete Dairit is a doctor and currently a director at the World Health Organization. When he heard we were at the stage of going to the press, he sent word that he misses the press work. He was, after all, writing all his school life as sports editor of the Highlights and as editor-in-chief of the Guardian. And when he sent his piece for this book, you just knew that this is a writer who has chosen to serve the people through medicine. Manolete is a particularly examined life. He thought out his moves with care and resolve. What he did not understand, he set out to understand. When he needed to know the ideology behind the cries for social revolution, he entered a 3-day retreat that would be his rapid indoctrination to the national democratic movement. Of that retreat, he would say, quote, "It was an all-new perspective for me. As an Atenean, I was steeped in studies of philosophy and theology, but oftentimes I found these courses, which dealt with metaphysics and phenomenology, quite abstract and dry. In contrast, the speakers at the teaching were presenting compelling arguments that made my mind race." Unquote. When Manolete finally understood, he set out to be a doctor in the barrios. That he is based in Geneva today is, we can be certain, all of a piece with his plans to serve as a doctor. Ed Aragon, like Manolete, sent his contribution to our book from another country, Australia. He has worked there as an artist since 1979, when he landed in that country, and has been a senior artist with the Sydney Morning Herald since 1989. He created new illustrations for our book, illustrations which we have spread out in various pages. Another one living outside the country is Jimmy Flor Cruz. Jimmy was of course forced into exile when, while a student observer in China, the writ of habeas corpus was suspended in 1971 and martial law declared in 1972. But since then, his life's work reads, formerly Time Magazine Beijing Bureau Chief, 2-term president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of China, and today, CNN Beijing Bureau Chief. Impressive as all that may be, none of it captures his essence, the inner strength, the quiet resilience, the deep creativity, the survivor's instinct that made him go from forced exile to Dean of China's International Press Corps. Jimmy's life can make for at least one, if not more, novels, and Karina Velasco has been waiting for years for him to give her just one book of the many. Jimmy takes his time. After the lead CEGP Publishers Group said, "No more than 60,000 characters, please," the fellow compressed his Philippines to China to journalism journey and ended up giving us an abbreviated intro into his life. Jimmy gets away with it, and so we await what this fellow will give us next, and we wish the story of the latest Chinese dissident papers down so Jimmy could join us. Finally, I get to Lest We Forget, a piece written by Roberto Versola. Obed, to those who don't know it, is a genius. But rare as that is, it is his character that defines him. He is that special person who thinks as he says and says as he does. If the word man, in its best, its strongest, its most formidable, and its most elevated sense were applied, it would have to be applied to him. Obed suffered some of the most unspeakable torture during martial law, in a persecution that went on for years, leaving him with bad dreams that sometimes left him alone, but returned when he wrote his piece for this book. Yet when he gives us a glimpse of what he went through, what we get are insights, examinations of a life, expressions of filial love, of loyalty and honesty. There is no wallowing, no ranting, no demand for caress or pity, which only makes his tale more powerful. As Conrad de Quiros says in an introduction that can stand as a chapter of this book, quote, Versola's description of the interrogation methods his captors used on him after he was caught is all the more frightening for its almost clinical detachment. It is the most harrowing story here. It strikes at the heart of what happened during martial law, which was the conversion of the country into a military state. Unquote. Tonight, we will have an expert from Obed's tale, but we have spared Obed the burden of reading it, and we have asked Crispin Aranda to read it for him. For now, we'll leave you with a small book that cost us plenty. This is a compilation of our memories, our tears, our humor, our angers, of the justice and atonement we demand, and the new fight ahead. May we leave our grandchildren a kinder world than we have known. Thank you.